So sometimes instructors will have a problem wrapping their brain around what they can really do in Blackboard. So let's take a moment to analyze what goes on in class in a traditional classroom environment, and then compare those things to what you can do within a Blackboard course. All right, kind of a good way to think about these things. So we'll start our analysis with probably a very common thing that you may not even think about doing in the classroom: getting time-sensitive information to students. Obviously you do this. The reason I say maybe you don't think about it is that it's easy to overlook that as a separate step. This could be, when everyone shows up for class time, you tell them there's going to be a test next week, or that, Billy and Sue need to see you after class, or something like that. Things that are outside of the normal curriculum, or maybe even just a part of it, like test times, but they need special emphasis placed. There are definitely tools in Blackboard to handle those things. Students have questions in the classroom, and of course, again, you don't really have to think about that. If someone asks a question, you either answer it, or you tell them, hang on to your question until the lecture's over, or something along those lines. But when it's an online experience, a student can't just raise their hand and talk to the screen, so you may want to consider setting up some tools to let students ask questions, and depending on the type of question you expect to get, maybe answer privately or have a public answering forum where even other students could answer the first student's question. Depends. An obvious one: distribute things to the students, handouts and such. You get them from Comic Copy, you pass them down the row, and the students all take a sheet. Not much to think about there other than getting the copies made ahead of time. But you can certainly do that in Blackboard, and often that's where instructors will begin their use of Blackboard, is by posting handouts in a content area in their course. So definitely made for that purpose. Another tool that Blackboard makes available is what's called the My Grades tool from the student point of view, and for the instructor it's the Grade Center. This, outside of submitting final grades to e-services, is pretty much the only secure electronic way to get grades to students. You can't just post it in an email. That's technically a violation of FERPA, I think. You certainly can't, write it on a Post-it note and stick it on your office door or something. But Blackboard does make provision for that. Kind of the obverse of number 3, where you're passing handouts out to the students. This time you're having them pass things up to the front of the room. This would be the electronic equivalent of that. Definitely tools to support that function. And then having a discussion similar to point 2 about addressing student questions, but the implication is this would all be happening roughly at the same time, and not just onesie twosie sorts of question things, but actually holding a discussion. Again, we'll look at all of these in a little more detail now. All right, getting that information to students in a timely fashion. The tools you might turn to meet this need through Blackboard, the obvious one is the announcements tool, which you just put in the text or link to a website or a YouTube video or whatever that you want the students to find out about in this announcement, and it'll show up on their announcements list when they log into Blackboard. And assuming they've opted into the service, the system will even email them and let them know that there's an announcement to look at. Or you can just use the Send Email tool in Blackboard to directly contact them. The caveat about the Send Email tool is that at the start of every semester, if you're planning on using the email function in Blackboard, you should tell your students, go into the e-services system where you enrolled and check to see that Palomar has your correct email address on record. Okay? Some students end up, they put an email address down when they first applied for admissions, but that may be a year ago, 7 years ago. They may not even remember what email address they put down. So it's a good idea to remind them to go check that. All right. Now, the other thing about announcements and email, really the ideal is to do both. And that's simple to do. If you post an announcement in Blackboard, there's a little checkbox that will also send that announcement out as an email to the students. Again, they'll only receive it if they've gone in and made sure they have the correct address listed with the college. All right. Dealing with student questions. Well, what could you use for that? The first and obviously can be overlooked thing is to have a frequently asked questions document written up, because, I mean, let's face it, you know, every semester there's students who will ask some certain question, and you already know what you're going to answer. So why not assemble those questions into a document and put it there for students to see right from the get-go? Well, sure, some of them won't read, but you know, this is the best we can hope for, is to already have answered their questions, and then when they ask later, well, you can tell them, go read the FAQ. And please don't call it a FAQ, okay? Don't pronounce that. It's FAQ, frequently asked questions. All right. The one thing to resist as a temptation is writing up the questions you wish the students would ask. One thing you might want to try is literally write down the questions the way the students ask them one semester, and try to use that same language in your document. Correct spelling, of course, and obvious grammar mistakes, but try to use the phrasing that the students use, and that's going to be a more effective FAQ document. Okay, you could also use a discussion board tool. Maybe you'll set up a forum that is just for, you know, general questions about the syllabus. And then students could go in there and they could start a thread and ask their question, and then you could go in and reply and give them answers, or you could allow other students to answer. Of course, you'll want to monitor that and make sure they're answering correctly. I know in a few cases, instructors who actually give out extra credit would offer that if students would participate by answering their fellow students' questions in the discussion board. And of course, it's most commonly the students who don't need the extra credit that end up doing that sort of thing, but whatever. And again, there's the send email tool. And if you want to provide a link to the send email tool to your students in the course, they'll be able to send you email to whatever you have on record with Palomar. Actually, it's a good idea for you as an instructor to check in Blackboard to see what email address is listed for you, because on occasion in the past we've had data integration slip up from the e-services system where it switches to what address might be set for a student in your, if you were taking a class as a student. That sort of thing has come up in the past, so periodically, like, you know, once a semester maybe, just go in and make sure that it's actually set to the correct email address. And if you want to change what email address it's set to for your own account, students get to just go into e-services and change it themselves there. But us employees, well, we end up having to contact human resources and ask them to change it. It's a bit of a more laborious process, okay? But that way it'll ensure that you'll get the emails the students send, and of course you can just reply right back to whatever they have on record. Okay, enough dealing with their questions. How about giving them handouts, right? Okay, the most simple thing to do is put these things in electronic documents in a content area. Most commonly that would be going into one of your content areas, adding an item, attaching a file. You might want to think about the types of files you're going to be distributing, but, you know, anything that you might print out for the students, chances are you can just make that available to them in the course. There's a specialized tool in Blackboard called the voice authoring component that actually lets you leave a little recording of your voice. So this could be used to augment some textual information that you're giving students. You know, if there's 3 or 4 paragraphs of text, maybe you'll want to record a, 45-second little snippet of you pointing out what the most important elements are. And sometimes mixing that medium, text, with your voice can raise the impact of the material for students. You can also put in videos, like this one that you're watching, which is being hosted off of YouTube. Anything that you generate yourself, you're the copyright holder of, so you could post publicly on YouTube if you want to. Certainly that's the most trouble-free way of distributing video content. If what you want is to have, like a feature-length film that you wanted to show in class, but you don't want to take up the class time for it, you could actually bring that into the academic technology department and have them digitize it as a streamed video that would be accessible from within your Blackboard course. And, if that comes up for you, you can ask for details about it. But the reason that they can do that for you is because of the TEACH Act, which, modifies copyright law and lets academic purposes use material electronically pretty freely. Again, you can contact Academic Technology for any details and questions you have on that. Things like this PowerPoint presentation, well, because obviously that is what it is showing up in this video, is something from PowerPoint, in case you hadn't noticed already. And yeah, you can just take like that PPTX file and put it up in Blackboard. That's probably not the best solution. You may want to consider doing something like this, recording it as a video, or converting that into a PDF handout version of your slides, because frankly, your students are not going to get as much use out of being given the PowerPoint slide deck as they would out of, a recording of you actually presenting with the material. After all, PowerPoint is a speaker's aid. It's not a replacement for the speaker, right? Of course, the more change you make, the more work. I mean, it's not too difficult, but it's not simple to make a video like this. So you might want to consider more turning it into a PDF document that they could read on just about any computer or mobile device, something along those lines. With a PowerPoint file itself, it's not going to be useful if someone's trying to read it on an iPad or something like that, okay? So you want to keep in mind with anything that you post into your Blackboard course, are my students going to be able to access this from whatever device they're using? You might really be surprised by how many of them want to be able to sit in a coffee shop with a netbook or an iPad and actually look at their course material. It really does happen. Okay. As I said about the PowerPoints, handouts, if you do that, you'll want to check out the different, you can print it as some document, like a PDF, and you can check out the settings in PowerPoint to do that. Like, do you want to have a sheet that's 6 slides on it, or 3 slides and some lines for note-taking, or 1 slide a page? The sorts of things that if you were going to print it out for your students, you'd plan for. Put that same planning in, but instead of printing out paper, you're going to produce a PDF and post that online. And then a video presentation, if doing something like this intrigues you, contact Academic Technology, and we can help you out with, well, actually the whole 9 yards. We have equipment for faculty to come in and use to make recordings like this. We can give you instructions on how to go out and do it on your own. It's not the kind of thing you describe here, but we can certainly work with you to help you make these presentations into videos and make them better available to your students. All right, so we're about halfway there now. So informing students of their grades. Grades are always a tricky thing, but in Blackboard, what you can do is go into your grade center and you post the grades in there. Then you'd have to give students access to the My Grades tool, and they'd be able to see their own grades. Now, sometimes I have to actually tell people, no, just because as an instructor you see all the student grades doesn't mean each student sees all of the grades. They only see their own. Okay, Blackboard isn't insane. It doesn't show everything to everyone, but segregates it by student. And using the Grade Center, it's a little daunting at first. If you want to communicate with grades this way, I would recommend either viewing some of the videos that Blackboard has prepared, and you can find those off of the help menu in your own course, or contacting Academic Technology and asking them to help you get started using the Grade Center. The Grade Center specifically is one of the most complex subsystems in a Blackboard course, so a little tech support assistance when you're getting started would definitely be indicated. All right, once you get grades into the grade center, one of the things that's kind of nice is you can actually generate basically report cards on the students' grades. So if you wanted to, you could just tell it, okay, give me a grade sheet for Bill and Sue and Nancy, and then you could actually print those out in paper and mail them to them through the postal service, or catch them after class and hand them their grade sheet and talk to them about it. That sort of thing is very possible. Okay, again, you might want to contact Academic Technology for assistance with that the first time out. And one thing that the Grade Center in Blackboard gives you that is not all that intuitive when you start thinking about it is it's more than just scores. The way most people start using the Grade Center is putting in, Bill earned 12 out of 20 points and so forth. But you can also add comments or attach files that would then be available to the student when they looked at their My Grades list. So the Grade Center can actually be a more rich communication tool than just telling them they got 75% on the last test. And actually, if you wanted to, you could even, write up something in your word processor and save it as a PDF and send that off to the student using the Grade Center, and they'd get it on the other end and be able to read whatever it is that you wanted to tell them. Heck, you could even record a video for them if you wanted, although that's probably overkill. So lots of ways that you can get grade information back to the students, and students do love that. Once you start posting grades in Blackboard, the students may begin wanting you to grade things faster and faster. So you might even want to put your foot down and say, okay, look, you took a Scantron test in class. You need to give me more than 5 minutes after class ended to get them graded. That sort of thing. Sometimes students just assume that because it's electronic it happens instantly, when, as we know, nothing is farther from the truth. It takes time to do this stuff. Okay, collecting student work. In the classroom they can pass papers up, but that doesn't work all that well when you're communicating online. I suppose you could have your students mail their printed essays in, but that probably wouldn't be a great solution. There is a tool in Blackboard called the assignment tool. Frankly, I don't like its name that much. It doesn't have much zing. But the way this tool works is you as an instructor would set up the assignment, give it some points possible. The student would then click on that assignment and either type in a response or, more frequently, attach some file that they've created in a word processor, or if it's like a photography class, maybe you have them go out and take a digital picture and then submit that, those sorts of things. They attach a file and submit it to you, and then you can use the needs grading component of the Grade Center to actually see what they submitted and then give it an assessment value, and then they'll see the grade. So it's all bound together, the turning in of the work and the grading of the work and the student seeing the grades. Once you get used to it, it's a really smooth workflow. If what you're talking about is essays, there's also a plagiarism detection tool called SafeAssign, which you can set up safe assignments in your course that work kind of like the assignment that I just described, only it accepts, only PDF and Word documents and things of that nature that are definitely going to be textual. And then when students submit something to a safe assignment, it gets analyzed to see if there are any similarities with other works available, either just out on the internet or with the SafeAssign database of works that have been submitted from other institutions or works that have been submitted here at Palomar. And it does a decent enough job of detecting plagiarism, and it'll give you a report back, and you can choose whether or not you want to share that report with the students. Actually, a lot of times when students first use SafeAssign, they read over the report and all of a sudden they realize, oh, that's plagiarizing? Nobody ever told me that before. Maybe they're just playing dumb, but maybe they really didn't know what was plagiarism and what wasn't. But anyway, Safe Assignment is a tool for detecting plagiarism. Okay, There is another way to collect student work. That's the tests and surveys components in Blackboard. I lump them together because they're extremely similar. Tests have a point value associated with them. Surveys don't because they're anonymous in nature. With a survey, you can tell what students have taken the survey, but you won't know which student gave which responses. With a test, since there's a grade, obviously you know who took each test and what they said on it. It is fairly complex to set up a test. It's a lot of work, but once you get it built, you might find that it's extremely useful for you because you build the test in your Blackboard course, you deploy it for your students. If you're using strictly objective questions, they can take the test and it grades it for them, and you don't even have to intervene. They get their score back immediately. The students love that. Or if you're trying to survey your students on some topic, you'll get the results back and you'll see, oh, still Bill and Sally haven't taken it yet. Maybe you send them an email saying, hey, go take the survey, and then you can look at the aggregate results and see like, oh, 75% of my students like pepperoni pizza, or whatever it is that you're trying to find out. There's some question types where you can give them the opportunity to freeform answer things, like the essay question type that, of course, Blackboard's not going to attempt to grade in the case of a test, but it can even be a way to have students, write something for you to see. That's often useful in the surveys and certain types of tests. Okay, so those are ways that the students can send work to you, and in some cases even have the system take care of some grading functions for you. All right, class discussion. This one, honestly, nothing's ever going to come close to the ease in which a group of people can just start talking about something. So don't expect that sort of functionality out of Blackboard. It's just not possible with technology. There's that barrier of having to have the computer convey your remarks to someone else, and that always makes it less enjoyable than just having a discussion. Okay? But there are tools that can get the job done. Maybe not as well as sitting around in a room, but sometimes that's not an option. The discussion board is the most commonly used one, in which the instructor sets up forums and students would then post their remarks into this board, or they could reply to other people's remarks or reply to the reply to someone's remark. You can, of course, join in this discussion as well, replying anywhere as needed. There's some functionality for even assigning grades based on discussion board use, although that's not an automatic grading sort of thing. Thankfully, the computer doesn't try to evaluate people's writing style and assign a point value. That has to be left up to the instructor if you're going to do grading on it at all. Okay? There's a similar tool where you can, called a voice board, obviously, where the instructor sets up the voice board, and then instead of typing up a post, people can actually record their voice. This is similar to that voice authoring component that we talked about earlier. And so this is useful sometimes if the actual way that things are pronounced matters. So ESL classes, the world languages classes might get use out of the voice board, or even something as simple as, okay, the students need to know how to pronounce this word. I'm going to assign them to actually say that word to me. And then you could listen to people trying to say, Archipteryx a bunch of times to make sure they all know how to spell it correctly or speak it correctly. That's one thing that you could never have as a risk in a classroom, but if all the student is seeing is their textbook or written documents that you've posted, maybe they actually won't know how to pronounce some of the vocabulary of your subject. And boy, wouldn't that be embarrassing for them. So this sort of a tool can be used to minimize the danger of that. Again, it's never going to replace sitting down and talking, but another thing to keep in mind, even with an online class, most people can access a telephone. So if you really just need to have that sit around and talk function, consider a conference call or even just a one-on-one phone call to communicate with students. It doesn't have to all go through Blackboard, but This is a series of tools in Blackboard that might very well help you replicate what you're already doing in the classroom. Okay? Look for other comparisons like that as you begin exploring your Blackboard course.